Welcome to Biblical Answers. My name is Elikem. This video is a response to anyone who think Christianity is the one that brought slavery to Africa, or the whites were the one who brought slavery to Africa, or God endorses slavery. This video is a direct response and a reaction to Abraham bin Moshe and anyone alike. Let's get tuned as we diagnose and go into the verses and the notions, the narrative. Let's listen.
Praise God lacks common sense. They say, "By doing your Jesus, oh, you're powerful. They should come to my house. I am wiser than them." Only Jesus also don't come from. But Jesus, not the people like I said, they could do service. The last verse, Jesus, or the man account for. Now, when catch yourself, go down for the Leviticus 25:39. If a fellow Israelite living near you, if a fellow Israelite living near you, don't show poor that, don't show poor that, he sells himself to you as a slave. He sells himself to you as a slave. You cannot make him do the work of a slave. Don't make the Israelite do the work of a slave. He shall stay with you as a hired man. He shall stay with you as a hired man. And serve you until the next year of restoration. Until the next year of restoration. At that time, he and the student shall leave you. He and the student shall leave you and return to his family. And return to his family. And to the property of his ancestors. And to the property of his ancestors. The people of Israel. The people of the people of Israel. The Lord's slaves. Are the Lord's slaves. And he brought them out of Egypt. He brought them out of Egypt. They must not be sold into slavery. They must not be sold into slavery. He is ready or you slave and yet do not treat them harshly. Do not treat them harshly. But obey your God. But obey your God. But if you need slaves. But if you need slaves, you may buy them. You may buy them from the nations around you. From the nations around you. Abba. This is the beginning of slavery. I approach them and not justify the slave master. People are passing me. Okay. Yes, you may also buy the children of the foreigners who are living among you. You may also buy the children of the foreigners.
Let's add another one to it. His take on slavery, his take on Christianity and slavery. Let's do another one and we'll do the reaction.
Blacks hate everything about slavery except the slave master's religion and the slave master's language. The black man hates everything about slavery except the slave master's language and the slave master's religion. But you embrace your religion and your language on the brain. I mean, go to Quran and say, don't comment section, can you speak Arabic? Or slave master's language. Your place is out to an aqua KPI, best was here. Oh, yes. Tiasa, young Jackie book, no. Adia, we are saying, and so you slave. The 21st century, that is how we slaves, the international community will deal with you. And I'm a Michael Jackson, for a free will, heal the world, make it a better place for you and for me. Let me say the best gospel ever. The best Nyaminyong, heal the world, make it a better place for you and for me and for the entire generation. There are people dying. If you care enough for the living, make it a better place for you and for me. Powerful message. Powerful message. But the Bible at the stamp ABC slavery. So, Bible. There were and baby among God slaves in Bible just slave you too. And baby up in slave to
Well. Again, it seems our brother here and people like him, many people have knowledge about the wrong kind of Christianity. And it's not shocking because even most people who say they are Christians cannot refute this person and people alike. Because many of us have the wrong kind of Christianity and we practice the wrong kind of Christianity. So I don't blame him. Because the gospel of Christ Jesus have been misconstrued even before he was born. And many people take advantage of it. But first off, we have to agree that slavery is not God-made. Slavery is man-made. Slavery is universal. That simply means that slavery happened in every part of the world. It's a human thing. Slavery is man-made. It's a human thing. It was a human method, a human system that was used to run a kingdom or a country or a tribe. That was a human method. And in the world of the Bible and in their world, in the ancient world, this was the best they could do. This was the best they could think of. Every part of this world, every tribe, every nation have practiced slavery or have been involved in slavery one way or the other. Slavery is not a Christian thing. It was a human thing. And of course, the Bible have to do with human stories. Have to do with human stories in which you find the stories of God. Because God Almighty rules in the affairs of men. The hand of God is in the stories of men. If you have faith in God through our Lord Jesus Christ, the Spirit of God is in you, and that Spirit that cannot be seen, you can feel and you can see His works in your life. The hand of God is in our affairs, our everyday life. And so that is what the Bible is about. One of these days we'll be going into how to approach the Bible in different series. The Bible have to do with human stories wherein you find the story of God. And so you are going to find a lot of things, a lot of human activities that doesn't necessarily mean God endorses it. For instance, you see people marrying 3-4, it doesn't mean God endorses. That's a human thing. You see people buying slave and having slave, that doesn't mean God endorses it. It's why in their world, it was normal in their world. It's a problem when you read an ancient material and you want the ancient material to align with your modern mindset. And that is a big hypocrisy. If you are reading a material that is thousands of years backward, you have to stay within their context. How they view the world, how they saw things is how you read. If you read an ancient material today and you want the material to think like you today, you are a hypocrite and you are ignorant. Now, there was a world of the Bible which even us who are in Africa, our ancestors had the same world in their days. Slavery happened among tribes in Africa, in every part of the world, Asia. Every human being was part of slavery. It was not a white man thing. It is not a Christianity thing. Slavery is a man-made thing. And in their days, slavery was a method of running a nation and a country. When we take slavery, Akans enslave each other. Always enslave each other. Even though we speak the same language, you hear the story from Agokol, even though we speak the same language as Elwes, we were sometimes slaves. And we went there not being slaves. We went there to stay there, and later on, they were given forced labor. It's like that in every tribe. The Akans and the Fantis fought, and the history is there. The history is there. Recently, Otunfo went ahead to give, a boast about having the Doma chief's head under their stool and all that. And it was hailed. It was held by a lot of people, and that was how their world was. So if you read the Bible and you want it to think like you today, there are a lot of moral things we accept today that they didn't accept. There are a lot of things that morally we see as wrong today, and their world, they didn't see it as wrong. Slavery in those days was a method of dominance, a method of service, a method of rendering service. And so the word slave, you are going to see clearly as we go into it, doesn't only refer to somebody who was captured from war or who is forced to serve. So Asantis enslaved each other, the Elwes, the Gans, and you can go through histories. When you see the word slavery in the Bible, it doesn't mean God endorses it. Now, he quotes Leviticus 25:39 to back his case. And that was Moses talking to the children of Israel. These are humans coming from another nation. And when you read that well, you notice Moses is the one talking. Moses is giving them laws, teaching them how to relate with one another. Of course, you see a difference between in their world. That was so peculiar, because even in their world, people from the same tribe, hide others and enslave them, because it was a method of man. Moses gave that law that if a fellow Israelite who is poor and wants to be a slave, don't treat them that way. And that's the mind of God for the whole world. Of course, Israel was that representation of God as at that time, because they choose to walk with God. So that shows God's mind for the whole world. God's mind for the whole world is that we serve one another. You are going to see it clearly as we proceed. God's mind for the whole world is what Moses was telling the children of Israel. So that Leviticus 25:29 is not God saying that go and buy slave and all that. I will be reading this shortly. But I want to put this fact across, that slavery is a universal thing. It was a universal thing, and it remains a universal thing. And in their world, it was normal. That was how they trade. That was how their system got run. That was how they live. And today, all of us are still slaves. Slavery just changed. The method just changed. Today, you are paid for your service. In those days, when we say you are a slave, which we are going to go into, sometimes you are paid, sometimes you are not paid. Many of us today are still slaves. Let me not say many, all of us. As long as you work for somebody, as long as you serve somebody, you are a slave. We are just afraid of the word slave because, of course, in their world, and we know what happened in history, how people, treated slaves and all that. And so that was what Moses was addressing to the children of Israel. and that shows God's mindset for the whole world, because Israel was the representation of God, and that is why he says they are my sons. It's just representation, and God's plan was for the whole world and not just Israel. We'll go into that in another video, rebutting him saying that God is only the God of Israel. We are going to go into that. So slavery was a universal thing. It was a universal thing. It was how they trade. It was how the world was run. It was how services were rendered. There are two kinds of slaves in their world. There was the involuntary slaves, and there was the voluntary slaves. And Moses was talking to the children of Israel that if somebody is poor and you want to serve you, let that person be a voluntary slave, and don't treat that person as involuntary, as what I'm about to explain. So the involuntary slaves are slaves or servants, people you buy with your money. And today you see it as weird. Yes, in their days they buy people with money, and it was normal. Now the word slavery is what scares people in this modern world. Slave simply in the Greek and Hebrew means servant, and that's why you see even Jesus referred to himself as servant, that serves the disciples and told the disciples to serve one another. Jesus used it for his disciples, used that same word for himself. That word was used for Jesus doulos many a times. That we'll be doing another series. So you see that word servant is used. Paul used for himself, Peter used it for himself, because in their world that was the word that was used for work, service, one that renders service. Of course, it can be forced, it can be by force, it can be voluntary. And so the word servant or slave is not what we see in Osu Castle or in Cape Coast Castle. Many a times we go to these castles and then we go and take videos and then we cry, we are all emotional, saying that, oh, look at how the white people came to enslave us. Well, it simply tells of our ignorance, because slavery didn't actually happen in Osu Castle. It didn't actually happen fully in Cape Coast Castle. That system, that castle, was the system of buying. When they buy, they kept their slaves there. Of course, those slaves will serve one or two people there, but that was, let's say, the storehouse, and that was a system of money. If you use your money to buy something, you need to keep the thing. So slavery is not when they chain our ancestors and place them in some small dark room until they die. That was the process of purchasing, and that process of purchasing was okay in their world. And the word slave is serving, servanthood, and in their days is either you serve by force, you serve by voluntarily, you serve, you are paid, and that is voluntary servanthood. And the service by force comes through war or comes when you are bought. And of course, you see throughout the Bible and even throughout history, even Abraham had slaves in his house and had a slave that was about to inherit him, was about to be his heir. And so you will see that slavery was not what actually we think of today. Of course, a lot of people took advantage of that. There are people who didn't treat their slaves well, but there were people who treated their slaves well. Abraham had born slaves in his house and had a slave that he trusted that was going to be his heir. Simply to tell us that slavery back then was just one bought, or one who is bought, or one who is captured from war and is given to serve by force. And of course, that was the method. That was a method of man in working, in running businesses or in merchandise. If you have a business to run, you have a farm that you need workers, it is in their world they rather go and buy slaves, or in war they capture their enemies and force them to work in the farms or force them to do their bit. Now you can also go and employ people and pay them. Of course, that would be expensive, so people went in for buying slaves so that they work for them. All they will need is to feed them, or you don't need to even feed them too much and they work. You see throughout history that slavery is not when you are chained by your leg and your hand and then you can't do anything. That process was the process of which they were conveying them to their destination to serve. So the serving is what is costly. And today, what do we do? Today we've replaced that with what we call employment. Slavery is employment, or slavery is work. Even if you are not employed and I come, let's say you have a barbering shop and I come to your shop and you barber me for 2 hours or 1 hour 30 minutes, I have employed you. The moment I pay for the service you render unto me, in that 2 hours you are my slave, you were my servant, you served me. And of course you see it in all sectors of life where we render services for money. So the difference here is that we voluntarily work for money. And it was even in their days, just that people went for the cheaper one, that you buy a slave. Of course, it was not that cheap. You need to have money to be able to do that, but it was better than just paying people when they work for you. So many people went for that, and that was man-made. So slavery, number one, I said it's man-made. It was universal. It was in our culture. It was in our tribe and among the blacks before even the white people came to explore. And then number two, I said slavery was the method of which people work. So if you want to work, if you need workers or you want to work, is either you are a slave you were captured from war, or you were born slave, or you voluntarily go to work so that they'll pay you. So that was what was referred to as doulos or slave. Now, when you take that word slavery, you go gaga in the 21st century, but it was okay in their world because that was how they said, that was how the world worked. That was the method of man that was in those days. Like I said, there are a lot of things that you read in the Bible that is not God endorsed, that is just man-made, because the Bible have to do with the stories of men. And so that is how you have to approach the Bible in reading. So when you take slavery and you say God endorsed it because it's in the Bible, you have a problem. So that employment we do today is slavery. So Moses is teaching them how to treat God's people. How do we treat God's people? So we see that word, born servant, that in the Hebrew means voluntary and involuntary. You see the same in the New Testament, 6 verse 5. It's a servant, be obedient to them that are your masters, according to the flesh. Masters, according to the flesh, does it mean Christianity is endorsing it? No, that was the world that they were in. Slavery was a normal thing. That we think about slavery differently. Slavery was just one who is serving voluntarily or involuntarily. That was the word slavery. Okay, a servant. So either you are bought, either you are caught from war, either you are born in slavery. And also, we can also add one, either you give yourself voluntary, but that is not mainly what we are looking at. So these white people didn't bring slave to Africa. Slavery was all over our tribe. All of us, all our ancestors practice it. It is not a white man thing. You know, your tribe practiced it. You can go through your history. Your tribe practiced slavery. When they fight war with their neighbors, they capture slaves and use them for menial jobs. And you know, when these white people came in, they didn't enter into Africa with knives and guns to fight and enslave people. They came to buy slaves. Who sold the slave to them? If our ancestors didn't understand slavery, who convinced them to sell? Because where did they even get the slaves from? Number one, they got some from war. Their own black people. They captured some. Their accounts captured Fantis. They always captured themselves. All of us are involved. All of our ancestors were involved in slavery. So you see that they came, when you check history, they didn't come with knives to kill. Somebody said they brought Bible and they took as slaves. No, there's a difference between the people who came to just explore and buy slaves and then explore the land, and people who came purposely for the gospel of Christ. It is either you are a hypocrite to say that those who came were the ones who came to buy slaves. Of course, those who came will have slaves because it was a method of men. In those days, Christians had slaves. Christians were slaves also, not about Africa. And in Ephesians, 1 Peter, 1 Timothy, Corinthians, which we are going to do another video, I'll be taking my time to do Bible and slavery in another video. You see that it was all written to Africans. It was written to the Asians and all that. You know, it was not for Africans, because you know, slavery existed in those times, in those regions as well, and it was everywhere. Slavery is not a Christian thing. And so in their world, how they render services was either by involuntarily or voluntarily. And so that was how the system ran. And then it became by employment and other. Of course, there are many people who still force people to work. And so slavery is in that angle. And so when the white people came here, they came to trade. And of course, in their world, it's either you exploit nation by war or you exploit nation by money. You do business by exploring nations and new lands, and then you are able to get more slaves, or you use war. You know, that was the method. And these white people came in as, you know, merchandise to do business. And our ancestors that were in that business already, fighting one another and making others slaves, our ancestors were into that business already. That business was inexistent. So it was not God who brought it into the world. And you know, one of the things he says in that video, and you read Leviticus, said that was when slavery started. No, slavery was there before Moses was born. Slavery was there long ago, because that was the method of the world for work. You know, every human being will work and every human being will eat. So if you want to work, or if you want somebody to work for you, it's either you go and buy slave, or you pay for, you know, workers by daily work. And you know, many people went for the other one. That is what slavery was. So you see it in employment today, and it is not out of place for the apostles to, you know, teach their disciples how to behave as slaves and how to behave as masters. Note, the apostles didn't just wrote to slaves in their world, they wrote to masters. Masters, treat your slaves well. And today we see it today. As we are being discipled, we are taught how, we that employ people, we are taught how to treat our employers, because we are Christians, so that we can win them over. We are working for others. We are taught how to work, how to behave, how to be diligent at work. And it is the same. So Paul, Peter, and all people taught how to behave. They didn't just write to slaves, they wrote to also masters, because that was the method of work. Just like today, a pastor can teach his church members how to behave at work and how to be Christ-like at work, and teach employers how to be Christ-like in their rendering of businesses. As they employ people, you treat people well, and that is in Christian character. So it is not out of place. It doesn't mean the moment they wrote to the churches about treating servants your servants well, and then you servants be obedient, so that you portray Christ in that workplace. Christianity is endorsing slaves. Slavery in India was okay, because that was the system. We'll be making a mistake if we condemn their work. Because today, what we call employment, a generation will come that will see what we are doing today as evil. What if a generation arises one day and says what we are doing today is evil? The same way we see employment today as good and holy was the same way they saw slavery, servanthood in their day. Slavery is not a straitjacket that means that you are being forced to work. Of course, you will be forced to work, because what men do in those days was that they exploit nation with war, and when you fight, you capture slave. And if you capture slave, you have more people to work for you by force. You have more people to sell off, and people, because sometimes you have many slaves, you cannot keep them, and the slaves will fight you. So it was in the system of man, and buying of slaves started long in Europe, in Africa, even before white people came here in, as we put it. So buying of slave and the business of slave was not started by white. It was in already, it was there. Slavery was not started by the white, nor did God endorse it. So I'm adding the white because you see in those videos they always use the white. They came to enslave us. No, slavery was man-made. It was in the culture of the blacks, was in the culture or the method of the white. The only time that emerged was when these people started exploring lands, and then they also started buying. So they brought to their castles and they transport them to their respective workplace, like America and all that. Blacks were transported there, like Brazil and all that. So slavery simply means service, work. And so today, if you are employed, it's the same. And even if you are not employed and you render a service, even if you are the boss, the moment you are not using your own time, the moment somebody tells you what to do, you are a slave, you are a servant to the person. So don't be obsessed about the word slave. It's just changed. The method is just changed, but it's the same thing that we do today. We need to approach the Bible in their world, so we understand the Bible with sincerity, so that we don't get to be thrown aback. So what did I say? I said, number one, slavery was not endorsed by God. God only worked with the method of man. Number two, slavery was a universal thing. And I said it was a universal thing because it was in our world, it was in our culture, it was in the blacks, it was among the blacks as well. It was all over the place. Number three, the slavery was the method of which work was done. It's either you are forced to work or you give yourself voluntarily to work to gain money. And that was how the system was run. And today we see it as employment. Next time, when you are reading the Bible, you read with your common sense. You read with your mind, so that you will not be claiming common sense and then you are not reading with common sense. Thank you for watching this video. I'll catch you in the next one. Shalom.